A year ago, the Pac-12 looked like it was going to be a relic of the past. Oregon State and Washington State were left trying to rebuild the conference, with the 10 other members choosing to jump ship. It looked like they were going to be fighting up, trying to save the conference. But with strategical decisions over the past year, it looks like that has paid off, as they are just 2 teams away from securing their future. This is the rise, fall, and rebirth of the Pac-12. But before we get into this, if you enjoy college football content like this, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Also, let me know what other schools you want to see join the Pac-12 in the comment section below. The Pac-12 conference dates back to December 2nd, 1915, when the founders of the Pacific Coast Conference met and formed the conference at a meeting in the Imperial Hotel in Portland, Oregon. Ironically, the original members consisted of 4 schools: the University of California, located in Berkeley, California, aka Cal, the University of Washington, the University of Oregon, and Oregon Agriculture College, now known as Oregon State. The conference began playing football in 1916, and in 1917 they added Washington State College, now Washington State University, and in 1918 added Stanford University. The conference would expand to 8 teams in 1922, with the additions of USC and the University of Idaho. Then came Montana in 1924 and UCLA in 1928, bringing the members up to 10 total schools. The first league's commissioner was named in 1940 to be Edward N. Atherton, and was succeeded by Victor O. Schmidt in 1944. In 1950, Montana resigned from the conference, and in 1958 the conference was dissolved and replaced by the Athletic Association of Western Universities, aka the AAWU. The conference was disbanded due to a major crisis and scandal. Washington head coach John Sherberg was linked to a slush fund money used to pay players. The PCC found evidence of the prohibited activities of the Greater Washington Advertising Fund run by Roscoe C. Torrance and imposed sanctions. Torrance wrote in his book, "It's a fact in life that kids can't be a college athlete and make it through school without outside help if he's in any need at all. That's why there has been a fund like ours at almost every university." Throughout the history of the conference, USC, Oregon, and UCLA were all found to be guilty of illegal funds. 5 of the 9 members formed the AAWU, being California, Washington, UCLA, Southern California, and Stanford, with Washington State joining in 1962, and both Oregon and Oregon State joining in 1964. Thomas J. Hamilton was named the conference's commissioner at its inception, and the conference would go on to be named the Pacific 8 Conference in 1968. The conference became known as the Pac-8 in 1971. 10 years later, on July 1st, 1978, the University of Arizona and Arizona State University were admitted to the league, and the Pacific 10 Conference became a reality. The league added 10 women's sports in 1986 to 1987, and has since become known as the premier league in women's athletics, capturing NCAA titles consistently in those sports. Thomas C. Hansen was named the commissioner of the Pac-10 in 1983, a role he would hold for 26 years until 2009. Hansen was viewed as a controversial figure throughout his tenure. Ken Go from Oregon Live wrote back in September of 2020, "I know I'm in the minority in revealing my age, but I thought Tom Hansen did a good job as conference commissioner. Hansen knew the conference, he knew the people at the schools, and the ones in the athletic department, not just at the presidential level. He understood the NCAA and how to operate effectively within it. He was genuine and folksy. He even flew commercial." On the other hand, Matt Zemek from the Trojan Wire wrote, "From 1983 through 2009, the Pac-10 won 1 outright national title, USC in 2004. Washington in 1991 and USC in 2003 won split national titles. The BCS was something Tom Hansen loved, yet it didn't do anything for the Pac-10. In Hansen's 11 seasons on the job during the BCS from 1998 to 2008, the Pac-10 only had 2 at-large bids for BCS bowl games: Oregon State in 2001's Fiesta Bowl versus Notre Dame, and USC in the 2003 Orange Bowl versus Iowa. According to some, under Hansen, the Pac-12 was viewed as the 4th best conference behind the SEC, Big Ten, and Big 12. It was viewed that way because the ACC's premier teams, Clemson, Miami, and Florida State, were all down during that time period. Larry Scott took over for Hansen as the Pac-10 commissioner. The Pac-10 presidents looked outside their industry to hire Scott, who was the CEO of the Women's Tennis Association, and Scott's goal: raise the profile of a proud conference long hindered by its time zone and outdated TV contract. Scott was a slick talker who made headlines and wowed people immediately. He almost brought Texas and Oklahoma into the Pac-12 from the Big 12, which would have made the Pac a 16-team league with the additions of Utah and Colorado. The reason that fell apart was because Texas did not want to give up any of their revenue from their Longhorn network, and the Pac-12 was unwilling to make a special exception for one school. Because Texas wasn't coming, that also meant Oklahoma was not joining either. Scott then stunned the college football world when he was able to lure ESPN and Fox into a bidding war with Comcast that quadrupled the league's previous annual TV revenue. Stuart Mandel from The Athletic wrote earlier this week, "From that point forward, the presidents, led by Scott's principal champion, Arizona State's Michael Crow, gave him anything he wanted. And what he wanted was to launch a media company that he would run for a pricey salary, eventually $5.3 million a year." While Scott wowed the Pac-12 presidents, reporters felt that he was all smoke. He cared about the image he presented. He moved the offices from the suburban office park to downtown San Francisco and into some of the priciest areas on the West Coast. He flew charter and gave the reporters a feeling of a used car salesman. Scott launched the Pac-12 network without a proven media partner like ESPN or Fox. They had a weird 7-channel model that never caught on and never came close to matching the projected revenue figures. Remember, as a kid, it was impossible to find the Pac-12 games on the East Coast because of the Pac-12 network. And all I wanted to do was watch Oregon in their cool uniforms. The Athletic recounted last year, the league in 2015 had a deal in hand to finally get the network on DirecTV. And the presidents, led by Crow, rejected it. The same conference that hosted College Game Day for a matchup between number 3 Stanford and number 6 Oregon, and that very same year saw 3 of their teams finish ranked in the top 6, only a few years later had their top programs in dysfunctional states. USC had had a tough decade plus after the departure of Pete Carroll in 2009 till the arrival of Lincoln Riley. Stanford leveled off, and Oregon and Washington showed signs of being dominant national programs, but were not consistent. UCLA, Colorado, and the Arizona schools spent most of the decade in mediocrity. Utah played very well towards the end of the 2010s and into the early 2020s, winning the conference multiple times. The conference failing to produce a college football playoff entrant for 6 consecutive seasons and counting did immense damage to its national brand. So did a 1-8 bowl record in 2017 and one non-conference faceplant after another. Throughout this time period, top West Coast talent also began leaving for schools like Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, and Ohio State. Scott didn't help the league's image as he stood by his general counsel, Woody Dixon, who overruled an in-game official review, stayed at an almost $10,000 hotel suite during the conference basketball tournament in Vegas, and took a $2.2 million bonus shortly before laying off or furloughing half the conference's staff in 2020. The Pac-12 presidents allowed things like this to continue until 2021, when he was replaced by George Kliavkoff, the then president of entertainment and sports at MGM Resorts International in Vegas. But not before Scott pocketed more than $50 million himself. The Pac-12 network was a flop going back to 2014, as the Pac-12 was reaching only 11 million paying subscribers compared to the 57 million paying for the Big Ten network. The Pac-12 schools are facing a $50 million fiasco after Comcast overpaid for the Athletic Conference Regional Sports Network. The company realized it was overcharged for licensing fees from 2012 to 2016. This is why it will be hard for the Pac-12 to merge with a conference like the Mountain West, because no conference wants to be responsible for debt. Kliavkoff had no idea what type of mess he was walking into when he arrived at the Pac-12 headquarters. Distrust, unpaid bills, and just a few weeks into his job in July of 2021, massive upheaval across college sports. When Oklahoma and Texas left the Big 12 for the SEC, many thought that was going to be the death of the Big 12, and the Pac-12 would be able to grab schools like TCU, Baylor, and Oklahoma State, or maybe grab BYU, San Diego State, or Boise State to bolster their ranks. Instead, they did nothing. They stood pat and entered a handshake deal with the ACC and Big Ten called the Alliance. Kliavkoff pushed for the expansion of the playoffs, but voted against the model that was presented, which delayed the expansion to 2024 instead of this season. Then came the first major blow to the conference. USC and UCLA announced their decision to leave the Pac-12. The reason for this departure goes back to the Larry Scott days, but at that point, Kliavkoff had failed at his one job: negotiate a lucrative enough television deal to keep the conference together. Things began to look bad for the conference when the Big 12 was able to get their own conference deal done to keep their conference together with the additions of UCF, Cincinnati, BYU, and Houston. The Big 12 brought in WME Sports and IMG Media to negotiate their deal. They did this 2 years before their contract expired and took up potential time slots with ESPN and Fox. The Big 12 schools were also set to make $31.7 million per school. The Pac-12, on the other hand, were struggling to get a deal done. Kliavkoff and his advisors reported open talks with ESPN and Fox, asking for entirely unrealistic numbers, closer to the SEC's payment than the Big 12. They hoped that the California Board of Regents would block UCLA's move to the Big 10. Kliavkoff also chose to focus on finding the television deal first before adding new schools. The worst part of it all, though, was the Pac-12 hired a boutique firm in sports media advisors run by Doug Perlman, who was a classmate of Kliavkoff's back in the day. With the ship filling with water quickly, Kliavkoff bought time for himself by saying in December that the deal was delayed because he felt Colorado hiring Deion Sanders would raise the conference's value. The truth was, Kliavkoff never actually had a deal in place the members' institutions would approve. When Colorado announced their departure, Kliavkoff was about to present the network's final offer. He genuinely believed he was going into the room Tuesday presenting a unique offer from Apple, by which the members would make far more than their Big 12 counterparts if they met certain subscription thresholds, and everyone would rush to sign a new grants of rights deal. These were the same schools that were screwed by Scott when he presented the same type of model when it came to the Pac-12 network a decade earlier. That's when the dam finally broke for the Pac-12. According to many, no school remaining in the Pac-12 wanted to be the reason the conference fell apart. Oregon loved the idea of being the big dog in a smaller conference and hoped the Pac-12 would stay together, and Arizona State and Utah did not want to go to the Big 12. But at the end of the day, they needed to look out for their future of their programs and athletics, and there was a rope thrown to them that they felt they had to take. The nail in the coffin, or so it looked like, was when it was announced that Cal and Stanford would be moving to the ACC, leaving the former Pac-12 as now the Pac-2, with Oregon State and Washington State left to figure things out on their own. With no power conference extending them an invite to either school, it looked like the Pac conference was going to die and over 100 years of history would go down the drain. The 2023 season looked like it was going to be a farewell tour for the conference of champions. Many thought Oregon State and Washington State would join the Mountain West, so the debt of the conference would not follow them, as according to Kliavkoff, the lawsuit with Comcast was going to result in a $72 million hit. The overpayment came in two stages. The first is from the distributions withheld by Comcast to offset the 10 years of overpayment from 2013 to 2022, based on the company's flawed tracking of Pac-12 network subscribers. That totaled in $58 million. The second came from reductions in distribution in the 2023-2024 fiscal year to account for the corrections in the subscriber figures. That total is $14 million. The debt would be finalized before every school left the conference, costing all 12 universities $6 million each, so Oregon State and Washington State were not left behind holding onto the bag. The 2023 season would end up being a magical season, as an end-of-the-era situation. It was an exciting season that watched Oregon and Washington go toe-to-toe in two amazing games, one matchup during the regular season and one in the conference title game, a game I was at. It also saw Oregon State put together a special season before faltering at the end. Caleb Williams and USC put up explosive offensive numbers, Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. were both Heisman finalists, and the conference finally returned to the college football playoff, with Washington making it to the national title game, where they would fall to Michigan. Oregon State and Washington State went into this season as the only members of the conference being deemed as the Pac-2, and many wondered how long they would stay together under the conference banner. But like The Undertaker during a classic WrestleMania match, when he had his WrestleMania streak, when all seemed to be over, the conference would rise from the dead after shocking news came out last week. The reason this video is coming out today and not last week was because I was away with friends. But last Wednesday, in a shocking turn of events, it was announced that Boise State, Colorado State, Fresno State, and San Diego State would be leaving the Mountain West Conference to join the new iteration of the Pac-12 for the 2026-2020 season. This all happened because Oregon State and Washington State were able to sue the Pac-12 to take control of the board, allowing them to rebuild the conference if they chose to do so. The NCAA requires conferences to have at least 8 members, and after the Pac-12 fell apart, it was afforded a 2-year grace period to exist below the minimum. The timeline informed how quickly the conference had to move in order to continue to exist. It seemed unlikely that the rumored possible additions of Mountain West teams would come together due to the fact that under the Mountain West Conference bylaws, schools need to pay an $18 million exit fee if they give 2 years of notice, and double if it was less than 2 years. It will cost the departing schools $70 million in total, plus the Pac-12 will pay over $40 million for the poaching of the schools due to the Pac-12 scheduling agreement for the season. Many thought due to the cost, the amount of money would never allow this to actually happen, and many in the industry scoffed at the idea. Over the past year, multiple sources referred to those fees as a non-starter for this type of rebuild. People, I guess, were mistaken. The Pac-12 is expected to be in a position to help schools with the exit fees, in part due to the withheld media rights distributions to the departing members and other conference assets. This shows how financially viable the Pac-12 name is compared to the rest of the 5 conferences, as many feel that the only reason the Mountain West schools would do this is if they felt they could get a larger media rights deal, especially since it's likely the Mountain West will withhold media rights distribution the next 2 years, as they did with BYU, TCU, and Utah when they left the conference. The Pac-12 is expected to expand more, as to become a recognized conference by the NCAA, they will need to get back up to 8 schools before the end of the grace period. 2 teams to keep an eye on are Cal and Stanford, who could make a return to the conference now that it may be more stable than the ACC, which they left the Pac-12 for. The ACC is dealing with 4 different lawsuits that are related to the departures at Clemson and Florida State, and both former Pac-12 schools are parties in the lawsuit. Cal and Stanford are only making 30% of the league's media rights deal for the next 7 years, with increases in travel costs across the country. Although the Pac-12 won't be academically rigorous as it once was, geographically it makes sense for the 2 schools to return. Other potential expansion schools include UNLV, Tulane, Memphis, UTSA, and Air Force. With how well UNLV has been playing over the past few seasons, it is surprising they weren't in the initial wave of expansion, though the Nevada School Board may force UNLV to bring Nevada if they were to leave the Mountain West and want it approved. This leaves the Mountain West Conference in a precarious situation, as if they lose one more team that leaves the conference, it will drop below the 8 teams, forcing them to expand themselves. There had been previous speculations that members could try to dissolve the conference, a process that requires a 75% vote in order to avoid exit fees to join the Pac-12, but that would mean 9 teams would have to do so on the board. The money from the Pac-12 raid could help the conference rebuild, using the Pac-12 blueprint. With how well Montana State, and Idaho have been playing in the Big Sky, they could be potential expansion members, as well as North Dakota State and South Dakota State from the Missouri Valley, though that doesn't make much geographical sense. But in today's college football, geography doesn't really matter. And if the ACC falls apart, we could see the reverse of what Cal and Stanford did with the other ACC schools that don't get grabbed by the Big 10, Big 12, and SEC. The Pac-12 looked dead this time last year. The conference that had 22 national championships in football, 553 national championships in team sports, and 2,246 national titles across all sports, male and female, as teams and individuals looked like it was going to be a relic of the past. While many will point to the greed on why the Pac-12 fell apart, the real cause of the death is the failure of those in leadership positions from commissioner to the university presidents because of their arrogance and incompetence. The dam began leaking when Larry Scott was commissioner, and he got away with everything. But by the time George Kliavkoff came into the position, he needed to play everything perfectly, which he was unable to do when the dam broke. Now it looks like the conference is rebuilding under Commissioner Teresa Gold. While it won't be the same, it is still nice that the conference with over 100 years of history won't be going away. What do you think? Do you like what the Pac-12 is doing to rebuild? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out one of my other videos YouTube thinks you will love right here. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more college football content. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, remember to embrace the grind.